He threatened to kill her with one hit. Allegedly assaulted her multiple times. Destroyed her rising music career. And after being beaten down by two men in the street at 1:35 in the morning, she snapped. This is the story of Kivani and her manager, a professional partnership whose supportive business facade hid a pattern of threats and violence that would end in gunfire on Miami streets. What you're about to hear isn't just another tale of street violence. This is the story of a 27-year-old rising hip-hop star who built her career from nothing, only to have it all come crashing down in a hail of bullets outside one of Miami's most famous art districts. Kivani, real name Kivani Camilla Hicks, was the CEO of her own record label, a self-taught pianist, songwriter, and rapper who was finally breaking through in Miami's cutthroat music scene. Her manager was supposed to be her ticket to the next level, the person who would handle the business side so she could focus on her art. But surveillance cameras tell a different story. They captured the moment a professional disagreement turned into a brutal assault, and then into a deadly shooting that left her manager dead in the street and Kivani facing life in prison. The footage is shocking. Two men pin a young woman to the ground in a vicious attack. She fights back desperately but she's overpowered. Then she reaches into her bag, pulls out a gun, and fires multiple shots. Her manager collapses. The second man jumps into a car and runs her over before fleeing the scene. But here's where this case gets complicated, because the same surveillance video that prosecutors say shows premeditated murder also shows what Kivani's defenders call clear evidence of self-defense. Even the judge acknowledged she had a very good self-defense claim. So was this a woman defending herself against abusive men who had threatened her life? Or was it cold-blooded murder on the streets of Miami? The answer might surprise you, because the deeper we dig into this case, the more questions arise about power, abuse, and what happens when professional relationships turn deadly. I'm your host, and this is Whispers of the Criminal Mind, where we go beyond the headlines to understand not just what happened, but why it happened. Today we're diving deep into the Kivani case, a story that exposes the dark underbelly of the music industry and asks uncomfortable questions about self-defense, domestic violence, and how far someone can be pushed before they break. Before we continue, I want you to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're about to explore one of the most controversial cases in recent Miami history. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why this case has divided public opinion and sparked a movement that's still fighting for justice today. So buckle up, because we're about to enter the world of Kivani, where dreams of hip-hop stardom collided with a nightmare that would change everything. First, let's be clear about who Kivani really was, because she wasn't just another rapper trying to make it. She was a hustler in every sense of the word. Born around 1996 in Florida, Kivani Camilla Hicks grew up in Miami's working-class neighborhoods, where she taught herself to play piano and started writing songs as a teenager. By 2018, she was uploading her first tracks to YouTube and SoundCloud, grinding her way up from the bottom with nothing but raw talent and relentless ambition. But Kivani wasn't just a rapper. She was a singer, songwriter, pianist, and composer who built her own record label, Pretty Thug Music, and served as its CEO. While other artists were trying to get signed, Kivani was signing herself. She handled everything, booking gigs, producing tracks, managing her brand, building her following. Her music was a unique blend of trap influences and emotional depth that was starting to resonate in Miami's competitive hip-hop scene. Her brand was unmistakable, purple and green colors that represented creativity and boldness. By 2022, she had released a diverse catalog spanning from high-energy rap anthems to introspective ballads, all written and composed by her. This DIY ethic defined her, but it also meant navigating the industry's cutthroat dynamics without major backing. And that's where her manager comes in. The victim, whose identity remains protected out of respect for his family, was a man in his late 20s or early 30s. Physically imposing, he was brought in to handle Kivani's bookings and promotions. On paper, it seemed like the perfect professional partnership. She had the talent, he had the industry connections. He was supposed to be her ticket to the next level. Sh00ts had built everything herself, but as an independent artist, she was drowning in responsibilities. She needed someone to take the pressure off so she could focus on what she did best, making music. From the outside, they seemed to work well together. He was handling the business side while she was performing in Wynwood, Miami's hotspot for art and music, and networking with industry insiders. By 2023, Sh00ts was on the cusp of breakthrough success. But somewhere between the business meetings and late-night studio sessions, everything fell apart. According to sources close to Sh00ts, what started as professional collaboration turned into something much darker. The very person who was supposed to elevate her career allegedly became a source of threats and violence. Family members described Sh00ts as fiercely protective and talented, someone who used music to escape and express the realities of her environment. Her inner circle was tight-knit, cousins and childhood friends who had supported her from the beginning, attending her early shows when she was just another local talent dreaming big. This foundation of resilience would prove vital when her life spiraled into chaos, because the people who knew her best refused to believe she was capable of cold-blooded murder. Instead, they painted a picture of a woman who had been pushed to her breaking point. The tension between Sh00ts and her manager allegedly centered around the usual industry disputes: money, creative control, and boundaries. But in the high-pressure world of independent music, where personal and professional relationships become intertwined, these disputes can quickly turn toxic. As CEO of her own label, Sh00ts was used to being in control. She had built her career on independence and creative freedom. But according to later allegations, her manager's role evolved from helpful support into something much more sinister, a pattern of overreach that would have deadly consequences. The question that haunts this case is simple: how does a professional relationship meant to launch a career turn into a confrontation that leaves one person dead and the other facing life in prison? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, and have you ever had a work relationship go completely wrong? Because what happened next shows how quickly things can spiral when professional boundaries are crossed and trust is shattered. Now, this is where Sh00ts' story takes a dark turn, because what looked like a successful business partnership was allegedly hiding a pattern of abuse that had been building for months. It's not clear exactly when things turned toxic, but according to family members and a GoFundMe campaign they later created for her legal defense, Sh00ts' manager had allegedly been physically abusing her for some time. The professional relationship that was supposed to elevate her career had become a nightmare of threats and violence. Let me be clear about what we're dealing with here. This wasn't just about creative differences or contract disputes. According to sources close to Sh00ts, her manager would use his physical size as intimidation, allegedly telling her, "I'll kill you with one hit," during heated arguments. Think about that for a moment. This is a woman who had built her entire career on independence and strength, being threatened by the very person who was supposed to be helping her succeed. The size disparity between them made these threats even more menacing. This was a physically imposing man using his size advantage to control a rising female artist in an industry already dominated by men. The disputes allegedly centered around money, creative control, and boundaries, the classic pressure points in any artist-manager relationship. But when professional disagreements crossed the line into personal threats and physical confrontations, Sh00ts found herself trapped in a toxic situation with someone who had intimate access to her career and her life. As an independent artist, Sh00ts had built everything herself: her sound, her brand, her following. She was used to being the boss, making the decisions, controlling her destiny. But according to the allegations that emerged after the shooting, her manager was trying to exert control in ways that went far beyond professional boundaries. The GoFundMe created by her family painted a disturbing picture of escalating abuse. They claimed that both her manager and his associate had physically assaulted Sh00ts on multiple occasions before that fatal night in October. If these allegations are true, then what happened on October 9th wasn't an isolated incident, it was the culmination of an ongoing pattern of violence and intimidation. Here's what makes this situation particularly insidious: Sh00ts was essentially trapped. In the music industry, especially for independent artists, your professional relationships are your lifeline. Your manager controls your bookings, your income, your opportunities. Walking away isn't just about ending a business relationship, it's about potentially destroying your career. And for a female artist in hip-hop, the stakes are even higher. The industry is notoriously difficult for women to navigate, with fewer opportunities and more obstacles. Finding someone willing to invest in a female rapper's career isn't easy. So when that relationship turns abusive, the victim faces an impossible choice: endure the abuse to save your career, or walk away and watch everything you've built crumble. According to family members, Sh00ts tried to handle the situation professionally at first. She attempted to address the disputes through normal business channels, trying to maintain boundaries while preserving the working relationship. But if the allegations are true, her attempts to assert control over her own career were met with escalating threats and violence. The psychological impact of this alleged abuse pattern cannot be understated. Sh00ts was dealing with someone who had power over her livelihood while simultaneously threatening her physical safety. The person who was supposed to be her advocate in the industry had allegedly become her tormentor. This dynamic is unfortunately common in abusive relationships, but it's particularly devastating in professional contexts. The victim becomes isolated, afraid to speak out because their abuser controls their income and reputation. Other industry professionals might not intervene because they don't want to get involved in business disputes. The victim's complaints might be dismissed as diva behavior or artistic temperament. What's particularly troubling about Sh00ts' situation is how the alleged abuse was enabled by the very structure of their professional relationship. As her manager, he had legitimate reasons to be around her constantly, for meetings, shows, studio sessions. This constant access made it easier to exert control and harder for her to escape. The financial aspects also created additional pressure. As an independent artist, Sh00ts depended on her manager's connections and industry knowledge to generate income. Walking away would mean starting over, rebuilding relationships, and potentially losing momentum at a crucial point in her career. Friends and associates later described Sh00ts as charismatic and ambitious, but those close to her began noticing changes. The stress of dealing with an allegedly abusive professional relationship while trying to maintain her career and public image was taking its toll. The question that emerges from this pattern of alleged abuse is crucial to understanding what happened that night in Wynwood. At what point does a victim's patience run out? When someone has allegedly threatened your life, physically assaulted you, and used their power over your career to control you, how do you respond when they attack you again? Sh00ts supporters argue that she was a woman who had been pushed to her absolute limit, who had endured months of alleged abuse before finally fighting back when her life was threatened. Her critics argue that no matter what had happened before, responding with deadly force was an overreaction. But here's what we know for certain: by October 2023, the tension between Sh00ts and her manager had reached a breaking point. Whatever had been simmering beneath the surface of their professional relationship was about to explode in the most public and deadly way possible. What would you have done in this situation? When a professional relationship turns abusive, how do you get out? Share your thoughts below, because what happened next shows how quickly a toxic situation can turn fatal when there's nowhere left to run. On October 9, 2023, at 1:35 in the morning, outside Miami's Wynwood walls, the heart of the city's vibrant arts district, a professional dispute exploded into deadly violence. And thanks to surveillance cameras, we can see exactly how a heated argument turned into a brutal assault and then into a shooting that would change everything. Picture this: it's the middle of the night in one of Miami's most iconic neighborhoods, known for its colorful murals and thriving nightlife. Sh00ts, her manager, and an unidentified associate are standing near a white sedan when their conversation turns into something much more dangerous. The surveillance footage captures every horrific second of what happened next, and I need to warn you, what I'm about to describe is disturbing. The video shows Sh00ts and her manager exchanging heated words. We can't hear what they're saying, but their body language makes it clear this isn't just a casual disagreement. Suddenly, the argument escalates. The manager raises his hand and strikes Sh00ts. That's when the second man joins in, and both men pin her to the ground in what can only be described as a brutal assault. Let me paint this picture clearly: this is a 27-year-old woman being violently attacked by two larger men on a dark street in the middle of the night. The surveillance shows her fighting back desperately, but she's completely overpowered. These aren't warning strikes or restraining holds, this is a vicious beating. As Kivani struggles to get to her feet, she reaches into her bag and pulls out a handgun. What happens next unfolds in seconds but will echo for years to come. She fires multiple shots in rapid succession. Her manager, struck several times, tries to flee but collapses in the roadway. Even as he's crawling for cover, Kivani continues firing. The footage shows her pursuing him, delivering additional rounds as he tries to escape. But the violence isn't over. The second man, the one who had helped pin Kivani to the ground, jumps into the white sedan and accelerates directly at her. The car strikes Kivani, causing blunt force injuries to her legs and body, before the driver speeds away into the Miami night. The scene that follows is chaos. Kivani, injured from being run over, limps away from the area. Her manager lies dying in the street, having been shot multiple times. Within minutes, Miami police arrive, alerted by the city's ShotSpotter gunshot detection system. Officers found Kivani nearby, injured but conscious. Paramedics treated her on the scene for the injuries she sustained when the car hit her, but the focus quickly shifted to her manager, who was rushed to Jackson Memorial Hospital's Ryder Trauma Center in critical condition. Despite the medical team's efforts, he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The cause of death, multiple gunshot wounds. The entire incident, from the initial argument to the final gunshot, lasted only minutes, but those minutes would determine the rest of Kivani's life. She was arrested on the scene and charged with second-degree murder, a charge that carries a potential sentence of life in prison under Florida law. But here's where this case becomes legally complicated. The same surveillance video that prosecutors say shows premeditated murder also clearly shows Kivani being brutally assaulted before she pulled the trigger. The footage is simultaneously damning and exonerating, depending on how you interpret those crucial seconds. Crime scene investigators recovered multiple shell casings from the scene, and ballistics testing confirmed that Kivani's handgun was the weapon used in the shooting. Witness statements corroborated what the video showed, that Kivani had been assaulted by both men before she fired the gun. But here's the prosecutorial concern: while the initial shots might be justified as self-defense, Kivani continued firing even after her manager was retreating and no longer posed an immediate threat. This continuation of force beyond the initial threat is what prosecutors argue crosses the line from self-defense into murder. The hit-and-run aspect of the case adds another layer of complexity. The second man, the one who helped assault Kivani and then ran her over with the car, fled the scene and has never been apprehended. His identity remains unknown, and no charges have been filed in connection with his assault on Kivani or his subsequent hit-and-run. This missing piece of the puzzle is significant because it means that while Kivani faces life in prison for defending herself, the man who also participated in the assault and then tried to kill her with a vehicle remains free. The Wynwood Walls, normally a place where art comes alive, became the backdrop for a tragedy that would raise uncomfortable questions about self-defense, domestic violence, and the justice system's treatment of women who fight back against their alleged abusers. Kivani was arrested on-site and booked into Miami-Dade County Jail, facing second-degree murder charges that could put her behind bars for the rest of her life. But from the moment she walked into that courtroom, it was clear this wasn't going to be a typical murder case. At her initial bond hearing on October 10, 2023, just one day after the shooting, Miami-Dade Judge Mindy Glazer made a statement that would define this entire case. After reviewing the surveillance footage and hearing the initial arguments, Judge Glazer acknowledged that Kivani had a very good self-defense claim. Let that sink in for a moment. A sitting judge, looking at the same evidence that prosecutors were using to charge Kivani with murder, publicly stated that she had a compelling case for self-defense. But in the same breath, Judge Glazer denied bail, citing probable cause for the murder charge because some shots were fired at a retreating victim. This contradiction, acknowledging self-defense while upholding murder charges, perfectly captures the legal complexity of this case. The same surveillance video that shows Kivani being brutally assaulted also shows her continuing to fire as her manager tried to flee. The question becomes, at what point does justified self-defense become excessive force? Kivani's public defender immediately argued that she acted out of fear for her life, pointing to the size disparity between her and her attackers and the alleged history of threats. The defense highlighted the fact that she was outnumbered, overpowered, and had been told by her manager that he could kill her with one hit. But prosecutors from the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office maintained their position. While they acknowledged the assault captured on video, they argued that Kivani's response was disproportionate and that her decision to continue firing at a retreating victim showed intent to kill rather than simple self-defense. The case took a significant turn in November 2023 when, after further review and legal arguments, Kivani was granted a $50,000 bond. She was released to house arrest with electronic monitoring and ordered to avoid contact with witnesses. This bond approval was seen as a victory by her supporters, who had been arguing that she was a victim rather than a perpetrator. The community response has been remarkable. Kivani's family launched a GoFundMe campaign that has raised thousands of dollars for her legal defense. The campaign description frames the case as "justice for a woman under attack," emphasizing the assault she endured and the alleged pattern of prior abuse. Social media has rallied around the hashtag #JusticeForKivani, with supporters sharing the surveillance footage and arguing that she was clearly defending herself against two attackers. The movement has gained traction among domestic violence advocates and women's rights groups, who see this case as emblematic of how the justice system treats women who fight back against their abusers. As of September 2025, nearly 2 years after the shooting, Kivani remains under house arrest, awaiting trial. The case continues to wind its way through Miami-Dade Circuit Court, with pre-trial hearings addressing motions about self-defense evidence and expert testimonies. No trial date has been set yet, as both sides continue to file motions and prepare their cases. The prosecution maintains the second-degree murder charge, while Kivani's defense team pushes for dismissal or reduction of charges under Florida's Stand Your Ground statute. The legal limbo has put Kivani's music career on indefinite hold. Her YouTube channel still receives streams from curious viewers, but Pretty Thug Music's operations are essentially paused. The rising star, who was on the cusp of breakthrough success, now spends her days in electronic monitoring, her beats silenced while her legal fight continues. Meanwhile, the second man who participated in the assault and hit-and-run remains free, his case unsolved and no arrests made. This disparity in justice, Kivani facing life in prison while her other attacker remains unpunished, continues to fuel the controversy surrounding this case. This case exposes something deeply troubling about the intersection of gender, power, and violence in the music industry. Kivani's story isn't just about one tragic night in Miami, it's about the vulnerability of female artists, especially independent ones, in a male-dominated industry where business relationships can become predatory. The surveillance footage raises haunting questions that go beyond the legal technicalities. At what point does self-defense become excessive force? When you're being brutally assaulted by two men in the middle of the night, how do you calculate the appropriate response in a split second of terror? And why does the justice system seem more interested in punishing the woman who fought back than finding the man who helped assault her and then tried to kill her with his car? Kivani's talent and ambition should have been her ticket to success. She had everything: the skills, the drive, the business acumen to make it on her own terms. Instead, an allegedly toxic professional relationship built on threats and violence derailed everything she'd worked for. Her microphone became a gun in a moment of desperation, and now both her music and her freedom hang in the balance. But this case also highlights the power of community support and social media advocacy. The #JusticeForKivani movement shows how modern audiences are willing to look beyond simple headlines and examine the complex circumstances that lead to violence. People are asking harder questions about domestic abuse, professional exploitation, and what happens when victims have nowhere left to turn. The music industry, particularly hip-hop, has a long history of exploiting artists, especially women and people of color. Kivani's case serves as a stark reminder that behind the glamour and success stories, there are real people dealing with real threats to their safety and livelihood. So what do you think? Was this a clear case of self-defense by a woman who had endured enough abuse, or did she cross the line when she continued firing at a retreating victim? The answer might depend on whether you've ever felt truly threatened, truly trapped, truly desperate. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt you had no choice but to fight back? If you have a story of workplace abuse or industry exploitation, share it. Your experience might help others recognize the warning signs before it's too late. This has been another deep dive into the criminal mind, where we explore not just what happened, but why it happened. I'm your host, reminding you that behind every crime is a human story, sometimes of evil, sometimes of desperation, and sometimes of a system that fails the people it's supposed to protect. Subscribe to Whispers of the Criminal Mind for more true crime stories that go beyond the headlines. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our investigations into the complex psychology behind the crimes that shock us, challenge us, and force us to examine our own assumptions about justice, violence, and survival. Until next time, stay safe, and remember, the truth is rarely as simple as it first appears.